Reporting from Arkham Asylum, this is Mr. Rogues. In this video we spotlight the underrated rogue, Johnny Sorrow. Johnny Sorrow, real name, well, Johnny Sorrow, was first briefly mentioned in Starman number 8, published in 1995. The story was written by James Robinson. In it, Johnny Sorrow is briefly referenced as being a supervillain during World War II, whom the original Starman, Ted Knight, fought. Robinson never actually did anything with this character though, and who knows if he ever even planned to. A few years later in 1999, writers David Goyer and Geoff and penciler Phil Winslade took this mysterious, supposed Golden Age villain and actually created a character out of him. In Secret Origins of Supervillains 80-page Giant number 1, we finally got to see who this Johnny Sorrow was. We didn't find out much about him though. He was an old supernatural villain composed of a floating suit and red mask. If he removed his mask and showed you his supposed face, he went mad and then died. In the story, Johnny broke into the super prison known as the Slab and freed supervillain the Icicle. Johnny used to know the Icicle's dad, the original Icicle, back in the day, and now he wants to recruit Junior for a new iteration of the Injustice Society. This story was intended as a build-up for an upcoming arc in the new Justice Society of America series, in which we would at long last, after so much teasing, really get to know Johnny. But first, Johnny appeared briefly in a couple of JSA issues, recruiting additional members for his Injustice Society. And then in JSA 16, published in 2000, it all finally kicked into high gear. The arc was called Injustice Be Done, and ran across 5 issues of JSA, featuring the writing of Goyer and Johns, and the pencils of Steven Sadowski. In this arc, Sorrow's mysterious origin was explained to us. He was once a silent film star in the 1920s, but when talkies came around, Johnny found himself without a career. The big movie star was now a forgotten nobody, and sometime in the early 1940s, he took on a life of crime as a supervillain instead, which was the style at the time. He went on to battle Starman and many other Golden Age heroes, and then during a big fight with the entire JSA in 1944, Johnny's grim fate was sealed. He acquired a new gimmick for his arsenal, a subspace prototype, a vest which allowed him to phase in and out between dimensions, making Johnny a slippery knave. However, not slippery enough, as Sandy the Golden Boy, the trusty sidekick of Sandman, managed to hit his subspace gizmo with a grappling hook. This action had dire consequences though, as the device began to malfunction. Johnny was thus torn apart and pulled into another dimension, a so-called subtle realm, where he was banished in a shapeless form. There, Johnny encountered strange entities, hideous things cast aside by God when he created the world. Mistakes, I guess. They now worshipped a different kind of god, a massive monstrosity known as the King of Tears. This thing wants to come to our world and rule here as well, but it can't do it on its own. It needs someone to summon it. Now it had that, in the form of Johnny. The entities crafted a mask for Sorrow, a mask that would contain his grotesque form, allowing him to exist in our world. Once he was sent back into our dimension, Johnny first went to see his wife, Andrea. Confused and frightened to reveal himself, he lurked around her for days, phasing in and out of reality, until finally gathering up the courage to confront her. Of course, she was shocked and couldn't understand what was happening. In his eagerness to make her understand, Johnny took off his mask without thinking, and when seeing her husband's new face, his true form, Andrea died instantly, fueled by a hatred for the JSA, and Sandy especially, for what they'd done to him and made him do to his wife. Sorrow set out to complete his task, summon the King of Tears and bring it to Earth. He was, however, stopped by the Society in the end with the help of the Spectre. The Spectre managed to contain the King at the last minute, while Johnny himself disappeared from the scene. Decades later, he's returned, and with the help of his newly formed Injustice Society, he's coordinating attacks on the various JSA members. Little do anyone know though, including his own teammates, that all of this is just part of Johnny's ploy to yet again bring the King of Tears to Earth and let it tear our world apart. Naturally, the scheme was once again foiled, and this time Sorrow was defeated by Dr. Midnight, who tricked him into looking at his own face himself. All that was left of him was the mask. It wasn't the end for the dastardly rogue though, as he returned in the 2002 graphic novel JLA, JSA, Virtue and Vice, a team-up of DC's 2 biggest superhero teams. It was again written by Goyer and Johns. In this tale, Johnny has abandoned the King of Tears and the Injustice Society, instead forming an alliance with the Justice League's old nemesis, Despero. Both of them had been stranded in the Abyssal Plane, a dimension between realities, and there they bonded over their shared hatred of a superhero team. A pact was made, and together they'd get vengeance upon the Justice League and the Justice Society, and then take over the world, of course. It took the combined forces of these two teams to beat them. In 2006, Johnny reunited with the Injustice Society in the pages of JSA Classified, becoming their leader once again. We had to wait 4 years for them to make a move though, which took place in the first 6 issues of JSA All-Stars. In this arc, Johnny and his Injustice buddies plot to summon the King of Tears yet again, but this time he's going to command it, and not the other way around. He's also apparently fallen in love with JSA member Stargirl, and attempts to court her through the typical supervillain fashion, such as kidnapping, and of course trying to kill her friends. In the end, it's revealed that nothing is as it seems though, as all of this was part of Johnny's secret scheme to make himself human again. After this story, we never saw the original version of Johnny Sorrow again, as 1 year later, the DC Universe was rebooted with the New 52. Johnny only appeared very briefly during this era, showing up in a couple of issues of Earth 2 Society. This version seems a bit different from the original, however we never find out anything about him. In 2016, the DC Universe was rebooted once again with DC Rebirth, which gave us another take on the character. This one appeared in the 6-issue miniseries Justice League vs. Suicide Squad. Here, Johnny is depicted as a former member of Amanda Waller's original Suicide Squad. Now he's teamed up with his old teammates, including Dr. Polaris and the Emerald Empress, under the leadership of Maxwell Lord. Max has promised them revenge on Waller, as long as they play along with his scheme. This version of Johnny seems to be almost identical to his old post-crisis version, having the same origin and personality. His past with the Suicide Squad is new though, of course, and any connection with the Justice Society hasn't been revealed yet. As of the making of this video, Johnny Sorrow has yet to make another appearance in the comics, that I'm aware of anyway. I'm sure someone in the comments will prove me wrong though. As for other media, Sorrow has appeared in nada. People like to throw around the term Lovecraftian. This and that is very Lovecraftian, i.e. reminiscent of the works of H.P. Lovecraft. I feel the term is abused, and now anything with tentacles is Lovecraftian. However, if there's any villain in the DC universe who's very Lovecraftian, it's good old Johnny Sorrow. His unspeakably hideous face, which for the most time is never actually shown, alternate dimensions inhabited by strange entities, and of course the King of Tears, a giant monster god. All of that is very Lovecraftian. So it seems to me that Goyer and Johns made his character as a tribute to Lovecraft. However, they also made him as a tribute to the golden age of comic books, particularly supervillains of that era. Goyer and Johns are basically pretending that Johnny Sorrow actually existed in the golden age. His entire backstory is set in those days, and the Justice Society is very familiar with him, treating him as an old foe, someone they've faced countless times, even though it was actually his first appearance. Let's not forget that name drop in Starman, 4 years before his real appearance. So we got the seed sown already then. Most people read that issue back in 1995 probably assumed Johnny Sorrow, the supposed enemy of the 40s Starman, was a real character. A character who had actually appeared in the Golden Age. I mean, there's so many obscure villains and heroes from those days, completely forgotten now. There's no way anyone can keep a track of all of them. So why wouldn't they believe it was real? I find this kind of fascinating. Johnny Sorrow was injected into the Golden Age in post, decades after that era had ended, and it does feel like it was created in the 40s, not 1999 or 95, whichever you count. Stylistically, he fits in perfectly with characters like Sandman and the Shade. So we've got this supervillain who's a tribute to both Lovecraft and the golden age of comics. In what dimension would I not absolutely love something like that? I almost feel like this villain was created specifically for me. I guess he kinda was. I mean, not me personally, but for people with my sense of taste. As such, I suppose Johnny ain't for everyone. If you don't like Lovecraft and the golden age, I don't see how you could be that big of a fan of Johnny Sorrow. And maybe that is why the character remains a cult favorite instead of being a mainstream success. Johnny has a very big fan base, but they're all kinda underground, I guess you could say. People who delve a bit deeper into the DC universe, and people with a certain taste. Or maybe he's not as big as Darkseid and Sinestro because he's a JSA rogue. That could be it too. The Justice Society is pretty niche. Your average casual DC fan ain't gonna get into their stuff. They'll stick with the members of the Justice League, the faces of DC. You're kinda screwed being a JSA rogue. I mean, just look at the rest of them. None of them have made it in the mainstream. Maybe Vandal Savage, age, but he's almost not a JSA rogue, having faced the likes of Superman and the Flash many times. Whatever reason, there's no denying the fact that Johnny Sorrow isn't one of the top DC villains in terms of popularity and fame, but I think he should be. In my opinion, Johnny should be up there with Darkseid and Sinestro. He's got a great design, awesome powers, a good backstory, an entertaining and very theatrical personality. There's nothing I can really complain about the guy. In other words, a perfect villain. I find it pretty strange that he hasn't showed up in anything outside comics. Nothing that I could find anyway. Not even a cameo on The Brave and the Bold. This guy could seriously hold up an entire movie on his own, let alone a few cartoon episodes. Here's hoping he does show up in something eventually, preferably in a big role. So there you have it. That is the story of the underrated rogue, Johnny Sorrow. One of the most underrated rogues of the DC universe. What's your take on the guy? Let me know in the comments. And as always, remember, Arkham Asylum awaits you in the next video.